So a lot of people say that the purpose of a prison system is to rehabilitate criminals. But how exactly is this done? How exactly do other countries rehabilitate their criminals? Well, this is a question that I asked myself, and so I looked at Sweden's prison system to look for the answer. I found a document titled Work, Education, and Treatment in Swedish Prisons. Now, when I read the title, I was intrigued by the usage of the word work, as in work inside of prisons. So I was like, well, what kind of work are Swedish prisoners doing? Well, I ended up reading through the document, and I ended up finding this. One occupational activity, often work activities, ordinarily form the basis for an inmate's weekly schedule. The work activities consist primarily of simple tasks such as assembly and packaging, but can also comprise different forms of production, such as in the agricultural, textile, and timber industries. So now I'm thinking to myself, now hold on one second, textile industries? Textile industries? Packaging? Well, man, this sounds an awful lot like they're describing prison labor. But this can't be, because prison labor is a big private prison conspiracy, so there's no way that every single country on the planet practices it. So then I just kept on reading, and then at some point in the report they mentioned the Netherlands as a point for comparison. There is legislation in the Netherlands which requires employers to employ disadvantaged groups on the labor market, for example, former inmates. They also have a clearer aim to get companies which outsource to prisons to be open to employing inmates who work with the outsourcing for similar tasks after release. Wow. So any doubt that I had is now gone, because they straight up said corporations were outsourcing to Dutch prisons. And I was like, no. So now we're talking about Sweden and the Netherlands. And I was like, why have I never heard of this before? So I tried doing more research on this on Google, and I hit a lot of roadblocks. But what I found out is that if you go to Google Translate and you type in words like prison, prison labor, prison work, prison workshops, and then you translate those words into Swedish or into Dutch or into German, you find out a lot about European prison labor. And it turns out that not only is prison labor widely practiced throughout Europe, but it's practiced a hell of a lot more there than it is here. So, allow me to tell you about all the things I found out about European prison labor by using Google Translate. So, this is the website in-made.dji.nl. This is a prison labor website for the Netherlands. It's currently in Dutch, but let's go ahead and translate it into English. It says, prisoners work in the Netherlands during detention for correctional production in Made, part of DJI. Thus, they learn important skills that employees help them return to society. So, InMade contributes to reducing recidivism. In addition to a wide range of manual and machine manufacturing, is InMade also guarantee quality, customized, and attractive prices. Knowing more? Click here to reach us. So it's got 3 categories here: professional services, high quality products, and then it says, above all, satisfied customers. It then has reviews of some corporations that hire Dutch prisoners. It says February took previously outsourced activities back to the Netherlands. Stripes Clothing, it says, prisoners who work on our clothes, deprived of their liberty at the moment. Our work gives them meaningful interpretation of their detention and hopefully inspire them to choose a different course after detention and to make something of their lives. Then you can click on View All Benefits, where they advertise to corporations all the benefits of using Dutch prison labor. Number 9 right here says for both small and large businesses. It also says 8,000 working detainees have never owned too short to carry out your assignment. Therefore, we always deliver on time and as agreed. So this is prison labor. You can also click on the value of work. It says, throughout the prisons are the Netherlands of the DJI. Penal institutions all have their own production company, each specializing in one or more areas. Together, these devices, penitentiary InMade. Okay, that's some Google Translate there for you. But then it says, at present, inmates are required to work 20 hours per week. So they are required to work in the Netherlands. 70% of prisoners working in an operating room, 10% in general jobs. So this is basically saying 70% of prisoners in the Netherlands are working for corporations. And then if we click on services, you can find all the services that Dutch prisoners provide, from packaging to assembly, which is what montage actually translates to, metallurgy, coding, woodworking, textiles, recycling, laundry services, bakery, maintenance, and X-Maid, where the prisoners can leave the prison, all within the Dutch prison system. Wow, pretty surprising, right? But at least they're getting paid minimum wage, right? No, according to several Dutch articles I read, workers for inmate typically get paid between 76 cents and €1.52 per hour. And by the way, this is not unique to the Netherlands. I just happened to read about the Netherlands first. After I found out about the Netherlands, what I did is I went back to Google Translate and I just typed in prison labor or prison work and translated it into German and Swedish and Danish and just kept on looking and looking and looking until I found what I was looking for. So, on top of Inmate, here are a list of websites that you can go to find out about prison labor in other countries. Cellmade.be for Belgium, Krimprod.se for Sweden, Krimprod.dk for Denmark, Justice.gv.at for Austria, www.sep.justice.gouv.fr for France, 131.justice.gov.uk for the UK, OATPFE.es for Spain. For Germany, they break down prison labor by each individual state, but here are some German states. JVA.de for Bavaria, VAW.de for Baden-Württemberg, JVA-shop-business.de for Lower Saxony, Knastleden.de for North Rhine-Westphalia. Outside of Europe, we also have www.e-capic.jp for Japan and csi.nsw.gov.au for the Australian state of New South Wales. And finally, we have Corcan for Canada, whose website is csc/scc.gc. Fuck it. That's a tongue twister. Just go to Google and type in Corcan and you'll find it. I also want you to notice how these websites are aimed at corporations rather than common people like you and me. This is not as simple as buying a birdhouse that an inmate made in a shop class and perhaps supporting them for money. This is clearly aimed at corporations, and notice how they constantly refer to the reader in second person, as in, here's what you can do to help these prisoners, and you can help them gain meaningful employment. In Austria, they say, the judicial institutions have many workshops where you can have work carried out in a cost-effective and reliable manner. In Bavaria, they say, in your immediate environment, production facilities are available that you can use without great effort. In France, they say, the know-how of our workshops is at your disposal in terms of industrial subcontracting. In Sweden, they say, Krimprod has the resources that can lower your production costs. In Belgium, they say, in 35 correctional workshops in Belgium are daily, flexible, and motivated employees for you. In Canada, they say, offenders who have worked with Corcan have a wealth of skills and knowledge to contribute to your workplace. In Japan, they say, prison work is a country's business, so you can relax your job with confidence. And then they talk about all the benefits of prison labor in Japan, and they even go down to say, you can save taxes to maintain land and buildings. Oh, and it gets worse, because every single thing that liberals say about prison labor here in America applies to European prison labor too. They can all be required to work and be worked for less than minimum wage. In Sweden, they work for 13 Swedish kroner an hour, which is about $1.50. In Denmark, they say they make €1.50 per hour. German prisoners work for about 12 euros a day. Spanish prisoners work for about 12 euros a day. French prisoners work for slightly more than €1 per hour, etc., etc., etc. As for a work obligation, The Austrian judiciary explicitly says that Austrian prisoners are required to work, as well as they do in the Netherlands. German prisoners are required to work, and Swiss prisoners are required to work. As for the Scandinavian countries, in Denmark and Sweden and whatnot, they have a occupational activity obligation. They either have to work or to study, but since most of their prison sentences are in a few months long, studying for college is really not in the equation, so most of them end up working anyways. The only countries that I looked at where inmates were not required to work was in France and in Spain. And by the way, the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution does not say that prisoners have to work. It says that they can be made to work. So it's not even true that prisoners are forced to work here in the U.S. And also, one quick fact, you may read a lot of articles online that say 37 states allow corporations to hire prisoners. Well, this is supposed to be stunningly high, but it's actually stunningly low, because that means that 13 states have banned something by law that's openly encouraged by the Dutch, Danish, Swedish, and Austrian governments, and all the others. In fact, if you want to see how much they encourage it, go to the websites and look at how much they encourage you to hire their prisoners, and say how it contributes to reducing recidivism, and how great they make it sound. In Belgium, they say, "Everyone wins big time. Why would you not go to jail? What's in it for you? You get quality at an attractive price. And the prisoners? Working gives them a chance to take their responsibility and compensate the victims. They acquire life and professional discipline, and lately find easily their place in society. So everyone wins big time. Why would you not go to jail?" In Sweden, they say, "Crimprod is an important part of the correctional relapse prevention. Our production unit creates jobs that broaden horizons, enhances self-confidence, and opens new opportunities for life without crime." In Denmark, they say, "When as a private or public company cooperates with prison services, helps you to strengthen the inmate's skills and their ability to live an ordinary life in employment after serving the sentence." In North Rhine-Westphalia, they say, "Work and meaningful employment are essential components of the rehabilitation of prisoners." In Japan, they say, "In preparation for social reintegration, sentenced persons receive guidance from the staff at the factory in order to cultivate a healthy mind and body while sending ordinarily every day and are engaged in work. Prison work is aimed at granting occupational skills to inmates, etc." I think it's safe to say at this point in the video that what American liberals keep calling job training is really just prison labor. The two are indistinguishable from one another. You cannot train prisoners to become welders without giving them some real-world experience with welding. At the same time, we here in America cannot have prisoners sew lingerie for Victoria's Secret unless we train them how to do it first. I mean, think about it. Do you know how to sew lingerie off the top of your head? No. So if we anecdotally have prisoners sewing lingerie for Victoria's Secret, then we anecdotally have some type of jobs training program in place. The only question is, does America have a job training industrial complex? Or two, does the U.S. just anecdotally have job training for prisoners, but it's very rare and not really an intricate part of the system? Those are the only two possibilities. Here's what's not a possibility. What is not a possibility is that the U.S. is somehow practicing slavery, but then in Europe they have this great job training program which is totally different from prison labor. American liberals seem to have this idea in their heads that job training equals job simulation. Like they're not really doing work, they're just simulating what work would be like on the outside world. Well, if you think that European prisoners are just simulating tasks and they're not doing real world work, I suggest you look at this video that can be found on crimprod.dk of Danish prisoners and ask yourself, does it seem like they're just pretending to work, or are they doing real work?
Vi er specielt gode til at pakke, folie, færdiggørelse af alle mulige produkter, lige fra grafiske produkter til elektroniske produkter. Vores kunder er meget tilfredse med det, som vi leverer. Vores kvalitet er i top, og vores deadlines overholder vi også, og vi er fuldt på højde med erhvervslivet udenfor.
Okay, guys. Good simulation. Good simulation. You did a good job of taking those electrical parts and putting them in a plastic bag. Okay, now let's rip open the plastic bag and put the electrical parts back on the conveyor belt, and let's just run the simulation again. That's all fun and games. No real prison labor here.
Så det tager nok det på oprettet, på grund af at kunderne fik deres varer forskellige steder fra. Der var ikke alle snikkerier, der var lige, hvor det tog længere tid at lave skydeskabning i regioner for eksempel. Vi samler alle møbler, sætter låger på og gør det klar til afsendelse. Sørg for det i orden.
Oh, good job, guys. Good job. Good job wrapping that up in saran wrap or whatever and putting it on the truck. Now we'll go ahead and unwrap it and put it back on the shelves, and then we'll take it off the shelves and put it back in the truck, and take it off the truck and put it back on the shelves. It's all simulations here.
Her på skrædderiet, der producerer vi uniformsbukser og t-shirts. Vi er faktisk nu det eneste sted i landet i dag, der har så stor en maskinparke, på grund af, at der ikke er nogen tekstilfabrikker i Danmark mere. Og det vil sige, at der er faktisk rigtig mange firmaer, der kommer til os, hvor de har fået lavet produktion i udlandet, hvor der er sket en fejl, om vi lige kan skifte en lynlås, eller kan vi lige skifte et vaskemærke og sådan nogle ting, fordi det er vi i stand til at gøre her.
Wow, it really sucks that they screwed up your zipper. Here, allow me to fix it for you, and then proceed to break it again. You know, just so that I can get the experience of what it would be like to be a tailor without doing any real-world tailoring.
Vores kunder er de forskellige resthuse i Danmark, hvor vi har en større traumeproduktion til. Og så laver vi store
Gosh, you know, it almost looked like that prisoner was making prison bars. But that can't be, because American liberals throw a hissy fit when prisoners are forced to work in the prison kitchen, you know, just to maintain the facility, let alone make their own bars, which they are doing in Denmark. Okay, so now that we've talked about Europe's prison system, let's talk about America's prison system. Obviously, both Europe and America have prison labor, but is there any evidence that prison labor in America is somehow worse than prison labor in Europe, or are they exactly the same, but the US just has a lot more of it? The answer is neither. There's absolutely nothing about prison labor in America that makes it worse or more common than what's happening in Europe. The first lie about prison labor here in America is that it's somehow pushed for by private prisons. We are constantly being told by liberals that private prisons lobby for longer and longer prison sentences so that they can get rich off of prison labor. And how much evidence do liberals have to support this claim? Absolutely zero. Not only is this claim not true, we actually have proof that it's wrong. In 2005, the Bureau of Justice Statistics published a report called Census of State and Federal Correctional Facilities for the year 2005. And this is a census of the correctional facilities themselves, not of the population. So it's things like how many of these prisons are maximum security, how many of them are minimum security, how many of them have a capacity between 500 inmates and 1,000, and yada, 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 yada. So as they're doing this census of state and federal correctional facilities, they ask these prisons, what type of prison labor programs do you offer? And it turns out that in the year 2005, it was discovered that private prisons don't really have prison labor programs. In the appendix on table 16, it says, number of correctional facilities under state or federal authority that provided work programs and the number of inmates with work assignments December 30th, 2005. There were 415 private prisons in the U.S., of which just 11 offered a work program. By comparison, of the 1,406 public prisons, 551 offered a prison industry work program. This means that 39% of public prisons had a prison industry program, but just 2.6% of private prisons had a prison industry program. Meanwhile, you want to know what percentage of prisons have a prison industry program in the Netherlands? 100.0%. That's what it says on Inmate's website. So here's a question for you. Why are liberals pretending that this is the case when it's the Guinness World Record for the least true statement ever made? Well, here's an analogy that I like to give. Have you ever seen these ads on computers where it's like, get six-pack abs in 30 days using this one weird trick? Personal trainers hate him. Well, replace six-pack abs with prison labor and replace personal trainers with private prisons, and it's the same concept. Why would personal trainers hate this one weird trick if it didn't work? Well, they wouldn't. So the fact that personal trainers hate this one weird trick automatically proves that it does give you six-pack abs. It's the same concept here. Why would private prisons lobby for something if every country in the world did it? Why would private prisons lobby for something if it was good for society? They wouldn't. So therefore, the fact that private prisons lobby for prison labor proves that it's evil. But it's not true, though. Personal trainers don't hate this one weird trick, and private prisons don't lobby for prison labor. They just throw in this villain that we can all get behind and say, well, this villain likes it, and you want to do something that Hitler practiced, right? So that's all that is, but they're lying, but we know why they're lying, so it's not there's a confusion as to where did this misconception come from? We know where it came from. Another lie that liberals are pushing about prison labor here in the U.S. is that it's growing very rapidly. We hear this claim all the time. Prison labor is booming. And just like the previous claim, the grand total amount of evidence for this is zero. Hey liberals, have you ever heard of these things called significant figures? You might want to use them. If you're going to claim that prison labor is booming in the U.S., here's what you're going to do. Tell me how much prison labor there used to be, with at least two significant figures, and then two, tell me how much prison labor there currently is, with at least two significant figures. So good luck meeting that burden of proof, because that's absolutely 100% on you. Look, here's the deal. When liberals say that private prisons lobby for prison labor and that it's booming, they're bluffing. They have absolutely no evidence that this is true, but they also know that you have no evidence that it's false. So they don't know it's true, but you don't know that it's false either, and they're pretty sure that they can trick stupid people into believing it as long as they make these dubious correlations. Well, liberals, I'm your worst nightmare because I'm actually well informed and I know the answer to these questions. But I happen to know for a fact that it's also not growing. And it comes from the very same Census of State and Federal Correctional Facilities report published by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. This report goes back pretty far, and if we look at the year 1984, the Bureau of Justice Statistics published a report for state prisoners in 1984. And it said in this report that there were 61,158 inmates working for prison industry programs back in the year 1984. So now we have a point for reference. So if liberals are going to go out and say prison labor is booming, they need to prove that it's way above 61,000 because that's where it already was in 1984. If we do our research, it turns out that the number of prisoners in prison industry programs today is still close to roughly 61,000. According to an article on the Seattle Times about prison labor, there are currently 67,000 inmates in the U.S. working in various prison industry programs across the U.S. But remember, there was already 61,000 in 1984. So basically, between 1984 and 2015, the number of prisoners working in prison industry programs went from 61,000 to 67,000. It is absolutely not booming. Finally, I would just like to end this video by saying this. If you know what a real, authentic version of something looks like, you can easily spot a fake version of that thing. And if you know what prison labor looks like when it's very common and an intricate part of your prison system, you can see just how much the US doesn't have it by comparison. So let me just tell you what to look for, and then you can kind of go about your merry way after watching this video. In Europe, it is very common for a prison to have multiple workshops inside of it. So for example, the largest prison in Sweden is a prison called the Kumla prison. And according to crimprod.se, inside the Kumla prison is a wood workshop, a metal workshop, a textile operation, an assembly and a packaging operation, and a surface treatment painting operation inside of it. Meanwhile, the largest prison in Switzerland is a prison called the JVA Postschweiz. And you can go to their website at postschweiz.zh.ch, and inside there they have a bookbinding operation, a carpentry operation, a paint shop, a metal workshop, a wood workshop, all within a single prison. And also, if you go to vaw.de, one of the largest prisons in Baden-Württemberg is a prison called the Bruchsal prison. And there, the prisoners make everything from cereal to Christmas greeting cards to shoes. So the moral of the story is that when prison labor is common, you can find numerous examples of prison labor all within a single prison. And when you understand that, you'll understand that America has nothing in comparison to this. Often, when liberals give examples of prison labor here in the US, they have to jump across state lines to find examples that can be found within a single prison within Europe. So for example, many articles on prison labor here in the US will say something like, in Texas, prisoners are making wooden chairs. In Florida, prisoners are making eyeglasses. In Virginia, prisoners are rolling cigarette butts. To stupid people, this may sound like a compelling argument, but when you know what prison labor looks like in Europe, you'll find a single prison in Europe could easily do all that shit. Meanwhile, many articles that talk about prison labor here in the US often bring up Starbucks and Nintendo. So you may be asking yourself, well, how did Starbucks use prison labor? Well, apparently a long time ago, back in the 90s, there was a company called Signature Packaging Solutions, and they did packaging for other corporations. And they hired some prisoners to package holiday gifts for Starbucks. Well, this is the most pathetic argument ever made, because if you go to crimprod.se, you will find a list of about 30 different prisons in Sweden that have a packaging operation in it. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you know what the authentic version of something looks like, you can easily spot cheap knockoffs. America has, in a way, cheap knockoff counterfeit prison labor. I mean, it's just nothing compared to the real thing. You people are going to say that Starbucks uses prison labor because Starbucks had some prisoners package some things when there's 30 different prisons in Sweden that has a packaging operation in it. In other words, it's not good enough to simply say something like, prisoners in South Carolina are sewing lingerie for Victoria's Secret. Because based on what we know about Sweden and in Denmark and Germany, if they were doing that in Europe, it would just be one of like 5 different sewing operations. They'd have a sewing operation, and then they'd have a wood operation where they were making wooden chairs, and they'd have a metal workshop where they were welding parts for Boeing. So you could say Starbucks, Boeing, and Victoria's Secret hire prisoners within a single prison in Europe. because it would not be difficult at all to go to a European prison and find a metal workshop and a sewing operation and a packaging operation within the exact same prison. In fact, here is a list of prisons in Sweden and Baden-Württemberg that would have all three of those workshops. So in conclusion, prison labor is a totally non-issue. And yeah, I think I've said everything that I need to say.